It is a cherished and assumed right of Americans that they have the right to join or not join a union, that they have the right to engage in collective bargaining should they choose to join a union, that an employer has obligations to respect the integrity of the collective bargaining process, as does the union, that when the parties reach an agreement, they have a reciprocal and equal obligation to honor that agreement, that should they choose in the agreement to establish a procedure to hear grievances about the workplace, that grievance procedure be uniformly and fairly applied, that there be terms and conditions that establish issues about which collective bargaining will be held and issues that are outside the purview of collective bargaining. Whether you drive a truck or work in a retail store, teach school, build houses, Americans assume that they have these rights and can participate or not participate as they see fit. In my view, there is a glaring exception to this assumed right that is ironic, since the glaring exception affects people who do so much for the rest of us. I've always thought that there are two categories of Americans that deserve special recognition. One are those who serve in the armed forces. In this era, who voluntarily serve in the armed forces, as each person in uniform does. And these are people who take a special and exceptional risk so the rest of us can enjoy the liberties and freedoms that we enjoy so much. And a second category of special Americans, I believe, are those who serve in the public safety professions. Those who respond to the call when we think we see a burglar in the backyard. Those who answer the call of the fire siren and respond whether it's the home of someone they know, respect, like, or dislike. Those who serve in the ambulance, who deal with the golden hour when someone's life is either saved or lost, depending upon the promptness and reliability of the people doing the work. I find it ironic that the glaring exception that exists to the assumed right to organize affects these individuals. The evidence would show that there are dozen states that do not provide a collective bargaining mechanism for people in the public safety professions. There are nearly 24 states for whom the mechanism, I believe, appears to be insufficient to protect the rights that most of us assume that we have. And I believe this is a glaring omission that should be remedied. The purpose of the hearing today is to debate the pros and cons of that proposition. This is a proposition that has been introduced by Congressman Kildee with his co-sponsor, Congressman Duncan, that has very broad bipartisan support. This is not an ideological position of any ideology. It is not a partisan position of either party. The legislation Mr. Kildee and Mr. Duncan have sponsored has enjoyed broad bipartisan support, and I think it's for a good reason, because that exception that I made reference to is one that many members feel should not exist. So today we're going to examine this question. We're going to hear from two panels of witnesses, one that will include Mr. Kildee, the principal author of the legislation, and the second that will include people who have expertise in the field of the legal consequences of this bill, and people who have expertise in the field of dealing with public safety emergencies every day of their lives and their careers. I think the panels will be informative and we'll learn much from them. I did, before I recognize Mr. Klein, wanted to point out that Mr. Duncan, the other original co-sponsor of this bill, is not present today because of medical reasons, and we wish him a speedy recovery and return to Washington. He's a very respected colleague on both sides of the aisle, and we thank him for his work on this issue and hope he rejoins us quickly.